I mean, I guess for the sake of proper introductions, like Marty mentioned, my name is Daniel Marcus. I'm an attorney by training and practice, where I work with a lot of companies in crypto, sports, tech, startups. Specifically over the last year, I've advised a number of big NFT projects. One called Nuclear Nerds, another one called Punks Comics, which just raised $100 million. And as I mentioned, or as Marty mentioned, I'm a professor in NYU Sports Business program, where I teach a number of courses, including and especially a course about the business of esports, which really covers the intersection of gaming, competitive gaming, and crypto. So that's me. I think it's probably beneficial to talk, like I get the opportunity to talk to someone in person. So I'll let Joshua introduce himself, and I think it's probably good if we go across the room, do that briefly, and then we'll kick it off.
Well, perfect. Thank you guys so much for everyone out there in the digital world and the physical world here. Thank you. So in town, Dubai, Austin, last night, actually, we had a great launch for the Metapods, what we call a portal to the metaverse. It's physical containers that we have in the digital space connected to Roblox. And we have Hydra, Meta Hydrogen, and it's around the whole ESG space, helping on board. And it's the first hydrogen car, green hydrogen car. So you see Formula 1, Formula E, and then it would be Formula H. So we launched that last night, and it was great. So there's a lot to unpack. My background is China, actually. I started in the supply chain, pharmaceutical supply chain, Sinopharm, the largest pharmaceutical supply chain, and that's how I got into blockchain. And it's been a wild ride since. So we've had a lot in that side. China, the ebbs and flows of COVID kind of pushed everything to Dubai from Singapore, and now spend a lot of time with Dubai and UAE being the first government going to be in the metaverse. So that's exciting. So helping them at the government level, and a lot of major announcements in the next few weeks. So stay tuned for that.
Great. There are a lot of terms there I didn't understand, so I'll probably have to ask you to define them later. Why don't we go with Josh Lida, because you're the biggest face on my screen right now.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Josh Lida here. I'm an art and business attorney down here in Fort Lauderdale. Name of our firm is Twig Trade and Tribunal, PLLC. So everyone always asks, we know what business law is, right? Contracts, negotiations. Art law is anything and everything you can think of in the art market. So I help gallerists, I help artists generally negotiate IP rights, trademark their rights, copyrights, close art transactions, art loaning, art funding, and then general advisory services. And over the last year, those art services have come to encompass a ton of NFT stuff. I am advising NFT companies every single day. I just was reading a consulting agreement before we got on here for a project. I'm also a visual artist myself. So I've bought some, I've sold some, and I'm very active on the art side of things in the NFT space. And I'm very happy to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, Josh, you and I can nerd out on inside baseball lawyer stuff, but we'll try not to do that, even though we're in the offices of Wilson Sonsini. May, why don't you go ahead?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mahboob. I am from Dallas, Texas. I am the co-founder of a company called MetaBank Defi. We are building the very first photorealistic financial district in the metaverse. I have a tremendous amount of experience building startups, as well as company that I grew in Singapore. I'm also a co-founder of another company, been in the VR, AR, mixed reality industry in health and wellness, education, and the government sector for quite some time. So have built on blockchain technology for before Meta actually came out and the whole metaverse craze started. So we're working on expanding our platform and taking it off from there.
Awesome. And then last but not least, Samy, you're last, because I know you can take it last, so go ahead.
Thank you. I'll take it. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Samy Dwek. I'm the founder of the White Knight Consulting and the Family Office Doctor. I am a banker in recovery, spent 26 years in banking, started my career as a foreign exchange trader in London and in Italy, fixed income trader and fixed income manager for many years. And I worked with families mostly in the Middle East, built JP Morgan's business in Central Europe, Eastern Europe, Russia, Ukraine. So we can talk about that if you want. But now I advise large families, in particular family offices, on everything from infrastructure to investments, and clearly everything in the digital realm has taken front stage. So Daniel, hand it back to you.
I don't think I'll take you up on your offer to talk geopolitics. I'm very wary about getting canceled.
Not politics, geopolitics.
Geopolitics, yeah, it's geopolitics. It's okay. It's fine. Let's start with something really basic, right? Like I think in the tech space, and now specifically in crypto, you hear a lot of words that are thrown around a lot and they become conflated and they don't really mean anything anymore. So let's start with something really basic. Josh, you're sitting next to me. What the heck is the metaverse? What does that mean? I think we'll probably get 4 or 5 different answers.
Right. I think for me, spatial web 3. So I think that does 2 things. Internet 3.0 is basically the internet comes alive. So right now it's very basic, like Chrome. When you go on Chrome, it's very, very basic. So that comes alive, connecting to your 5 senses. And the spatial web helps motivation. So the motivation for you to do something, that motivation connects and it brings it to life. And I think the metaverse helps bring value to life in a different way. So for me, spatial web 3, web 3 meaning basically decentralization and the ability to connect to a large group of people and decentralize that and to leverage those motivations. I think the metaverse can be centralized or decentralized, but I think that web 3 being able to make it more decentralized is where we're focused. But having that spatial web connecting to your 5 senses is for me the definition of how we see the metaverse.
Can you give me a practical illustration of what that looks like? Because we talked about things like a lot of your definition was what it is and what it isn't. Like, give me a practical illustration of the metaverse.
Like for us, like we're doing digital twins. So digital twins having, and last night we had t-shirts at our Metapod, right? So Nike having your pair of shoes, having that, or let's say Ferrari having a playable NFT. You have your real car you buy for $2 million. You can drive that in a game in the metaverse, right? And then you can use that NFT, that playable NFT, as a DeFi mechanism as collateral for a loan. So for me, the metaverse is making it connect to physical and non-physical value. So for me, it comes alive when you can buy that real Ferrari, and then when you sell it in the secondary market, you don't have to go across the world to fly there just to see if it's real. It's actually utility. So I can see it, I can drive it in the secondary market, I can actually understand that, and I can use it in real life.
So that was very helpful. Like we usually talk about these things in very esoteric terms, but like being able to understand it through illustration.
And that's what our middleware is doing.
Awesome. Samy, I see you on the screen and you were last. Let's mix that up.
Yeah, so I want to dumb it down a bit because people use too many technical terms, and for many people who aren't, I would say, well versed in everything tech, right? I think let's just bring it down. So for me, metaverse is everything that's related or touches the internet in any way, shape, or form. So that could be, like you said, Josh, it could be you just going on the internet, but it could be where I'm doing some form of gaming, but I have this interactive VA or AR. I mean, look at when you go on Amazon and you want to buy a coffee table, you've got the technology to take your phone and place it in your room and see how it looks in advance. This is where metaverse is starting to come more into the real life from the internet. So I think it's that connecting the internet world with the real world through different types of portals.
That was another good practical illustration. I appreciate that. May and then Josh. Unless we've covered it, in which case then we'll talk about something else.
No, I think it's exactly what everyone else said. It's bridging the gap between the virtual world and the real world, and building a value besides just your physical assets, right? So I think what we've always looked at was there was a huge differentiator between what's in the internet and what's in actual real world. So it's bridging that gap and combining it together where you're able to live virtually, but yet be able to have those physical assets and utility built in the real world as well. So I think that explains it. And as every company will describe the metaverse in a different way. When you look at Apple, they're utilizing AR technology, whereas Meta will utilize VR. So I think it just interprets it based on what each organization's really doing and what the project is all about.
Awesome. Josh, why don't you wind this up?
Yeah, and to kind of bring it all together, again, I think as everyone has pointed out, these are all different variations kind of within the general metaverse. I think you're going to see a spectrum, especially in the early phases, right? So in the NFT art world, a lot of the nucleus of the activity occurs on Twitter. So like Samy was saying, this is a real live art market where gallerists and artists and collectors are all interacting in real live time, making sales, making trades. That's happening through the internet, right? It's through a centralized platform, but it's through the internet. And I think you'll see different spectrums. You'll see the AR, you'll see the VR. And to highlight something Josh said as well, the DeFi aspect of NFTs, knowing who owns what, and then being able to more easily unlock potentially, you know, liquidity or value in those items because we know who owns them, we know what wallet it's in, we know where we can track it, we can put on smart contracts. I think that's where this is going to go. It's going to be a different spectrum depending on what situation you need to access the metaverse, so to speak. Do you need to put on the VR and the bodysuit? Or is it just maybe like Samy was saying, buying a new piece of furniture and it's through your house, you know, little things like that.
Well, let's use this as a segue because, you know, obviously you're the art lawyer and you got the art behind you. And art is probably the number one application that's become the hottest as far as things that people can understand. It's a vehicle for people to understand NFTs. But NFTs aren't new and art is certainly not new. But it seems like in the last, let's say 18 months on the heels of the Beeple sale or the Beeple auction, it seemed like a watershed moment. What are people seeing value in terms of NFTs that they weren't necessarily seeing value in the traditional art market? You know, what has caused that shift?
Sure, and it's a great point that you highlighted, and let's make a little bit of a very simple distinction here, like you said. So these drawings behind me, if I have an NFT that says I own that drawing, the NFT is essentially the digital receipt, right? It's telling people what I own. I own that thing. It's not necessarily one and the same, although some artists make it one and the same. So for artists, NFTs have been great because you get resale royalties. So they get a little bit of pocket money every single time a sale transacts. So for artists who have been in the space for 4 or 5 years and are the OGs and are gaining notoriety and selling through Christie's and selling through Sotheby's and getting $500,000 sales or the Beeple $70 million sales, they're going to make a resale royalty on each sale. And so it's creating a mechanism for them to more easily monetize their work, particularly for digital artists. For years, it was really, really difficult to sell and buy digital artwork. You could do it, but it was really difficult to track, really difficult to ship. Now it's a lot easier. You attach it to an NFT, the NFT can be transacted with no permission amongst parties. And I think you're seeing the community aspect as well. So twofold, you have the financial aspect for artists, you have the ease of collection for collectors, and then you have the community aspect of all these people who like art and want to talk about it and buy it, being able to connect via the internet and create that community. So I think that's what's really unlocked this market. And one last quick point, I want to highlight, the market was like $40 billion last year, and it's off the chart so far this year, although it's slowed down in the last couple of weeks. There's barely over 1 million wallets actively contributing to OpenSea or buying on OpenSea. And a lot of people have multiple wallets. So all of this financial activity is being generated by a relatively small pot of people for the time being. We haven't seen large institutions like museums or even big collectors really hop in yet. So it's a really, really early time.
And if I can just add, so I'm an art collector and I work with a lot of families that have art collections. And something that was really important that Josh mentioned, right? It's I have physical art and I keep a repository of everything I own. And one of the biggest issues that family offices face is how do I keep a track of everything that I own? And think of this, the NFT, the blockchain being a great way of being able to tokenize what do I have, and when I resell it, that authenticity, right? Because if I have a piece of art and I lose the certificate of authenticity, that's it. It's gone. The value's gone. But if I can find a way to tokenize it and maintain it in a wallet or wherever on a hard drive, now all of a sudden I've been able to protect my asset. And then Josh mentioned another really important thing. If you look at Picasso and some of the artists from, you know, bygone days, a lot of them died poor, right? Because once you've sold the art, that's it. That someone then values it, well, tough, you sold it. NFTs, which is kind of the evolution of the art market. So we used to have the old type of art, and now we've started getting electronic art, and now we're getting NFTized art. And so it's just part of that evolutionary phase, but now the artists can benefit the upside of their artwork as they get recognized. So I think NFTs are here to stay. You may not like it, but you know, get over it, deal with it, because this is where we're going.
Marty, we'd like to take questions. I see hands in the room. For one,
yes, absolutely. Please. One comment. So
tell us who you are.
Yeah, Joseph Chan. Sorry, I'm an investor in real estate and early stage debt. So with regard to the art, like I 100% agree that reduction of fraud, because that's very rampant in physical art. But, you know, a friend who's kind of gone down the rabbit hole of NFTs, he said that it's the new way for Evo reach to flex. Like, so Evo Board 8, instead of driving up with the Ferrari, now you put the Board 8 on the Twitter. There's a new way to find value and in there. So not every project will be like that, but for the kind of high-end luxury brand that Board 8 is, that is the, you know, whatever, the product, that is the new brand. So to speak, everybody wants it.
Was there a question in there?
No, I was making a comment.
Okay.
But I mean, so my only comment is especially.
I'm just kidding.
Right. So I think, you know, today's stock market, 90% of the value in the stock market is intangible assets.
Right.
And this kind of goes along, you know, with the intangible asset, you know, school of thinking. And at the same time, branding, grouping, where we talked yesterday about the pricing of different purses, and one costs $10,000 and one costs $100.
I think it's all part of, I think your point here, Joseph, is like, it's all part of the social compact to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Like, what is the green paper in my pocket mean if we don't all agree that it means something?
Right. If we agree that Bitcoin is what it's worth, or we agree that dollars is what it's worth, that is what it's worth, right? That's the market clearing price.
Exactly. So I want to let other people chime in on this. I have a follow-up question that's more broad than this. Josh, you're sitting next to me.
Well, no, I think the digital twin side is exactly what we're focused on, but with real consumer brand focus. So like the Ferrari car is exactly, that's actually one of our, so that happened later this year. But that, I think that having a brand and a trust with IP behind it is better at a large scale than Bored Ape. So Bored Ape is very small in comparison to the biggest brand in the world. So we're actually focused on the biggest brands in the world to actually kill two birds with one stone. So that Ferrari car, basically being able to have a digital twin and flex with the Ferrari car as your digital twin, your avatar, instead of a Bored Ape, and to have, or your yacht or whatever.
That's coming.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing. So I think that that's exactly, to your point, the need for why they do this. And I think gamifying commerce in a larger scale with Nike to be able to gamify it, connected to Roblox and everything that they're already doing, killing two birds with one stone. So they're marketing more of what they're doing. They have more upside in the digital twin, more margin, and then they're onboarding it for marketing into Roblox or their metaverse. So I think for us being able to see that as, you know, going beyond just art, as maybe it could be kind of, oh, is it really that valuable or not? You know, I don't know, but that's cool. But having real consumer value and having the actual pair of shoes that you can wear and then gamify that, and whether you stake your real car with other mechanisms for a DeFi play, I think you see gamified commerce in the future in a different way. So that's what I see as kind of the future of digital twins.
Yeah, the way I think about it in like very simple terms is to think of like it being verified on Twitter or on Instagram. You know, it's the same status symbol as like having a Ferrari or whatever, but now it's something that everybody wants. It's the cool club.
But it's like, you can't copy it, it's hard to do fraud, right? You can't, you know, it's immutable, you know, so that's like, you eliminate that fraud problem unless you have a problem with the physical. Is the piping that you're building like a sort of like an API format where people would just pull it in and pull in their brand into the
Right.
metaverse?
So even a bank stack, for example, like a smart contract. So Jamie Dimon being able to go on and write a simple DEX or a swap, literally with his clients without any programmer there next. So in the same way you go on Wix or Squarespace, any brand, Nike or JP Morgan, to be able to have that smart contract connect to Web 2 to Web 3, whether they're still built in COBOL, and that stack is still connected to AWS or Google or whatever. So you're basically having the option for decentralization or centralization and mixed. So I think that's really the future of being able to have no code. Like Gartner has like by 2025, I think 64% of the internet's going to be no code. So being able to onboard that for scale is the future for basically helping people connect to a wallet, for example.
Right, and to build off what Josh is, I'm sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
Go ahead, Josh.
I was just gonna say, just to build off of that, you keep referencing, you know, the Web 2 and the Web 3 interface, and I think that's really important. It is a new step in the going forward of the internet, and the option to be on the decentralized chain or be a centralized platform on the decentralized chain is really powerful. And the NFTs are going to unlock a lot of value, to your point, in Ferraris and whatever, even in land deeds, or maybe it represents shares in a fund that you can add more liquidity because it's easier to transfer. I completely agree. We are gamifying commerce, and you're gonna there's a lot of smart people in the audience. I'm positive we have a lot of smart people on stage. This is very, very early days. You're going to see some pretty, I think in the future, sophisticated and interesting applications of these items that are basically, these tokens that are backed by real items, either physical or digital, whatever kind of item it is.
I think we
As
have
we
four
go
smart
to
people on stage and one guy that's just managing traffic, and that'd be me. But
One comment about that.
go ahead, man.
Oh, wait, you made a comment as intellect or a company?
I mean, I opened the door. I opened the door. So we can turn this into a roast. Yeah, no problem.
I lost my train of thought. Oh, no, so like, what I was saying is like the ability for creators to capture IP and basically get that residual that they're talking about in NFT, as I said, we've never done that before. So you're now shifting like a lot of economics that would have been traditionally captured by a broker, right? Like if you're selling physical art, I'm going to sell these and get my commission. Now I'm going to sell to you direct, and I'm going to get a commission. I'm going to eliminate the Sotheby's, and I'll just take my 10% as an artist, right? And I'm going to see that in perpetuity. So you're building in an annuity for artists, which has never been available. So now you have this like big push, right?
100%. They have it like they basically have a music type model now, right? Like
Absolutely.
you
But
make
at the end of the
you
day-
make money on the front end, you make money on the back.
Exactly. So they can be their own record.
Yeah, so my greatest argument for what you're talking about is that Steve Miller got put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame,
Right.
and he addressed the audience and he said, look, I've made more than $1 billion for the record companies, and they won't give me comp tickets for my nephew and niece to come and watch me get inducted. So that, you're right. He had no ownership rights on his own music, right? So,
I mean, that's when they used to be able to sell music, which is not the case anymore. But this is a good, I'll use this as a good segue, and I think anyone can jump in on it. So I think we mentioned a bunch just in this interchange here, but like we're at South by Southwest right now. I cannot find a panel that is not somehow related to blockchain or NFTs. Like it is crazy. But I'm of the belief that you can't shoehorn blockchain into anything and make it a viable company. So my question for the group is, what are the most useful applications of blockchain, and which are the ones that are going to be most sustainable?
I'll kind of chime in. So as we were kind of talking about NFT, just to kind of add blockchain solutions based off of that too. I think transparency really highlights what we're doing, and the fact that you're able to see every single transaction that's performed or where it's been and who's performed it, right? So even with NFTs, I think one of the main areas that we see, it's how society perceives the value that's transforming. So even reputation, one of the things that we are working on in our financial district is digitization and NFT of your resume, as far as your experience and where you work, and being able to make that into an asset, and it being transparent. So back in the day when you, even currently, as you're doing background checks and such, that becomes completely digitalized, right? So lending services, that all goes into decentralization and blockchain, money transfers, insurance, real estate. I think eventually everything will become blockchain, and many governments are currently switching to blockchain technology or putting a plan together as to how solutions can be implemented or transferred on the blockchain. So everything will be easier and more secure, as well as much quicker to perform.
Samy, I want to go to you because I know we've talked about this at some length, but I figured probably for the benefit of the group, be able to have you chime in on this.
Yeah, so first of all, May, thank you for making that point. I think people, when they talk about blockchain, they just think about cryptocurrencies and that's it. And blockchain, to me, I look at it separate because it transcends beyond cryptocurrency. It's not limited to. So think about every transaction we do today. And Daniel, we had spoken in the past about leverage loan market. So for those who have been investors in loans are boxes of paper till today that you buy this box, you've got to go through it, try and work through what the hell am I buying, and the time it takes to settle a transaction can be up to 90 days. Now imagine if you tokenize all of that, you have all that information in a blockchain kind of solution, and we can speed up that process, make it less complex, easier to understand what you're getting. And you're right, May, it just makes a better kind of transaction in terms of understanding transparency. Where did it come from before? Who are the prior owners? How has this worked? And you could put that to every transaction. Real estate. The US real estate market is very well developed. As you can hear, I'm not from the US. In Europe and the Middle East, it's really like, God help you. There's really very hard to impossible to track what happened beforehand. So if you can now tokenize all of these transactions as global investors, it opens the door for a much more transparent transaction and experience. And then again, remember, for people, especially in family offices who may have small setups, this makes you so much more efficient in terms of doing a transaction and being able to actually have a repository somewhere easy to go and find it and track it.
By the way, Sammy's actually from Kentucky, but he does a really good British accent.
Yeah, exactly.
Josh.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I think what we're doing in the Middle East with one exchange in particular with the public markets, I see a lot of opportunity just at scale and what they're doing, commoditizing things. For example, like hydrogen, it doesn't really have a public market right now per se. So commoditizing hydrogen and using blockchain to do that, and then connecting it to technologies like IoT and things like that to standardize what it means to like going green, for example. So what does that mean for helping the environment? An ESG investment, right? An ESG investment, how do you quantify what that means to go green? So as IoT and other technologies are now connected to commoditizing hydrogen and other sectors, clean air, clean water, clean energy, I think there's now this value exchange in the same way that you see an exchange like Airbnb or Uber in the future. You're going to see now more exchange of value in NFTs. I see NFTs as just like a thumbprint. Your unique identity. It's that one ride, commoditizing your time, for example. So everything will kind of morph into now, instead of trading on NASDAQ where it closes, the market close, it'll be similar to booking an Uber ride. You have that value exchange in real time, and it's constantly. And I think that's the beauty of blockchain, to have that real time.
Josh, Lida, I'll let you have the last positive note, and then let's get cynical.
Let's do it. Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with what everyone said. I mean, it has so many applications. And I think the thumbprint is a really wonderful analogy. Again, coming from the art world, it's the first place that adopted it simply because it gave artists an ability to do what we're all talking about just from the blockchain side. You have a history from the artist that's verified, when they minted it, who owned it, what they paid for it. And, you've heard rumors, right, of, oh, well, wash trading, or you can use it for fraud or this or that. That's fine, because to Samy and May's point about the transparency, you can go investigate it. And very often you can deduce what actually occurred. So people can try to get slick on the blockchain, but as awareness of how you can track that down, increases, more transparency, this real-time 24/7 markets, maybe synthetic markets, maybe that drives more capital to the space because it's more trustworthy and you get faster solutions for tech problems that have been around forever, like hydrogen. I think it has so many applications. And then we haven't even gotten into the fact that NFTs are not necessarily, like, there's different kinds of smart contracts, right? And they can get very complicated. They can be very simple. There's a lot of different uses for them. And I do think it's just going to keep growing and kind of eat the world, so to speak.
So let's talk about some inside baseball stuff. Josh, you and I have talked about this, Josh Lida. So one of the things that I found baffling when NFTs were originally explained to me is that you get the token, but you don't really get much else. You don't get the underlying IP. So if you buy the artwork, you can't make copies of it, you can't make derivative works. My mind was blown. Like I've had to advise clients that have put a non-trivial amount of their net worth into Patrick Mahomes NFTs. And I asked them if they can license it. And I was like, I have to be the bearer of bad news. So my question to you, Josh, is, well, actually really to the group, we talk about a lot about utility and that being the next frontier. What does that mean? What does that look like?
So it's fun. I love the IP stuff. So I'm a big, like we were talking about legal baseball, like I'm a big IP nerd, right? And I could go on and on about it for hours. But in my career, I've never seen for lack of a better term, lay people get into philosophical debates over who should have IP rights, what kind of rights should they have, how can they monetize it, when should they get it, when does the transfer happen, really intellectually stimulating conversations. What we're seeing in the NFT space is, yes, you're right. It's just like real art. If I buy a painting from a living artist, I don't get anything but the painting, right? Maybe a little bit of display rights. I can show it in certain places. Okay, great. You can always transfer the IP rights though. So I think, again, just within the art market, we have maybe art financialization from the art funds, art loaning side of things with the tokens. But what about the IP rights? You worked on a project that you mentioned called Nuclear Nerds. Nuclear Nerds is a great example. They gave IP to their owners. So if you buy a Nuclear Nerd, you get the IP to a certain extent. You get the IP.
The disclaimer here is that like I wasn't the one that advised them to do that, so I don't want. I don't.
Right. And I'm not suggesting that that's what people should do. But what the point that I'm trying to emphasize here is what we've seen is there is a desire of communities and of fans of projects to know what their IP rights are and then have the ability to utilize them if that's what they want to do. So it kind of breaks down a lot of fascinating avenues for projects. And for me as a lawyer, I love having the option of saying, in the past, it was always keep your IP rights. If they want them, sell it to them, take a royalty. That's your potential value in the future if you get really big. Now you have an additional option. Do you want to give some IP rights away? Do you want to sell them to a company to monetize? And it's a lot easier to do that with an NFT and with it being backed, because like we said with everything, all the transparency, it's being tracked, all that kinds of stuff. So that's why I don't know if I answered your question, but I think I answered your question.
No, you did. You did. I want to be more broad than like whether you get IP or not with the purchase of an art NFT, because NFTs come in all shapes and sizes. So the question was, what does utility mean, and what does it ultimately look like in the context of NFTs?
But also keep in mind, if I were to buy a Damien Hirst, a Koons, a Picasso, I'm not going to go and start making lots of copies and selling it out there. So it's not that different from the real art market, because you wouldn't be doing that anyhow, right? Because let's be very clear, if I bought a Koons and start copying it, I'll probably get sued by him. So, Jeff Koons is going to sit back there and go, oh, Sammy's copying this piece that he bought from me. It's okay. He's going to go, hey, guy, I sold you one piece. Like, what the fuck do you think you're doing? And so how is that different than buying an NFT?
Right. And so to bring it all home exactly with that. So with the utility. So I'm just using it as an example of new utility in a space that's been an unevolved market for 150 years, right? The art market. Now we're seeing all kinds of new markets open up within it. And I think that's going to just be applied. So you'll see other utilities in that way. Copy and paste a lot of your thought experiments and markets that you have today, whether it's the art market, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's elements, whether it's metals, and kind of apply the technology to it. How can you leverage the technology to streamline the process, make it faster, make it more profitable? I think that's where the real utility is how you apply it.
Gotcha.
Just to kind of chime in with, just to kind of chime in with the utility, I think we'll see several utilities come based off of the industry. So even as we're applying decentralized finance and utilizing NFTs as assets for identity even, imagine where your birth certificate is a NFT and now it's traceable and it's easily accessible versus trying to go to a hospital that you were born in states away, countries away, right? So I think digital identity and being utilized as part of transparency and security, we'll see various utilities even come out of that in, traditionally versus what we currently have and what it's being utilized for.
As someone who knows just enough about HIPAA to be dangerous, I almost had heart palpitations what you described about birth certificates being NFTs. But I saw a question there and I saw your hand up, Marty. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, how do you, we had a client, we have a lot of clients that collect art, right? Like physical art, like behind the wall. And the advice I always hear from it is don't buy it as an investment, buy it to enjoy it. Buy what you want, buy all those. One of our clients had founded a museum, and that was the advice he gave me. And they've done very well. It's the best asset class they've had on the art side. He's like, look at it to enjoy. So how do you enjoy, if you're buying art as an NFT, what's the enjoyment of it? You visualize it or something? I'm just thinking it's code, right? Or some.
I'm in the sitting in the cynic's chair, so I'm right there with you. But I mean, we do have an art lawyer and an artist on the panel, so I think he's probably the best one to kick this to, and then anyone else is free to chime in.
So think of this. Think of this as if you were to go and buy electronic art. Okay. So you've got these pieces of art that could be computerized screens that you hang on your wall. It may not be tokenized, but it's electronic art. Now, the difference is that I may have that in a wallet. I can then plug it into my computer screen, a TV screen or whatever, and display it anywhere I want. And that NFT just shows that I have ownership, right? I have the rights to display it. So it's really a mindset. It's getting to the understanding this is no different than electronic art that I own today. Just the way that I hold ownership is through a blockchain methodology. And so to me, this is a mindset shift. And again, if you look at how art has developed, I've been going to Art Basel for years. Initially it was just like standard oil on canvas, sculptures, etc. And then all of a sudden we started to see these artists who started doing things using an electronic medium. Initially it was just some kind of lights with words, and then it was these electronic screens with animations. And so this is just the continuation of that development. But again, how you display it is no different than a piece of electronic art I have on my wall. I've got 3 different pieces of electronic art that I have on my wall that, I switch on the timer and at night it comes on and it's on, until I go to bed. It's the same. So that's just a matter of mindset. Sorry.
I think we need to see this electronic art, so we'll give you a little bit of time to be able to pull it up. Another one in the room.
Isn't this the same as iTunes? Back before iTunes was Apple Music subscription service, you would buy a CD on iTunes. You didn't get a physical CD or record. You just had the digital right to play that on any of your Apple devices. Now we put in it's video or an image or music. If the right is stored along with the digital representation of that piece of art, music, video, or image on a blockchain, and I can sell that now to somebody else. But it's the same thing. I can listen to it, I can see it, I can watch it for my own enjoyment, display it for somebody else who's with me.
Yeah,
same thing. Right?
I think you're.
That
You're.
has been around for a decade.
I think you're right, but you're also cracking the door open to a rabbit hole of like a philosophical conversation about like what the utility of art is. Like music, we get it. Like we listen to it, we enjoy it. Art for people that are unsophisticated or lay people, perhaps like me, sometimes you get it or you don't get it. Josh, I saw you want to.
I spend 5 figures sometimes for a piece of artwork that's hung in the house. I mean, right?
So there you go.
And I also buy albums still.
Art is art, and you either enjoy it or you don't. So the displays are actually improving all the time, and I think you're actually going to see. It's not going to be a massive, game-changing market because it's the art market, but you will see a race in the display arena for NFTs. Who can build custom displays? Who can build the cheap displays? Who can build the ones for the small? Who can build the music displays? It's just gonna be more and more on your face. You're gonna see it on your phone, in your AR glasses, in your VR world. At Art Basel, Samy, we went down to Art Basel. They had monoliths in the streets of Miami with just NFTs playing constantly. They have them on billboards all over the world. I would love, we have the Guitar Hotel in South Florida. It's a Hard Rock Casino. It looks like a giant. I would love to see NFTs on that because they can put screens on it. You'll see the art start to filtrate out more into the space, and then you'll see people get more comfortable with it. But to the point, Samy mentioned Damien Hirst. One of his most famous works of art is a tiger shark in a tank. That's it. I mean, that's what it is. And obviously it says more than that, but who would want to own that and put it in their home? Well, someone probably would, or they want to put it in a museum, or they want to donate it, or whatever they want to do with it. So it's one of those problems. Art can be a very divisive topic, but really it's just about applying the technology to other things as well.
What I'd like to see with the Hard Rock specifically, less commercials in New York, but that's just my personal opinion.
And I think it's also building value, right? So it's branding, and it's almost like, I would like to say, like a stock. So when you buy an art, you don't know if the artist is going to become famous or how much value it's going to hold. And based off of how the artist builds his brand, based off of community and society, the more value it holds. So it can tank and it can be worthless, or it becomes one of the most expensive of art that, because of what the artist has achieved. And then you can use it as assets, take money out, loans to buy houses, and several things such as that.
So one of the utilities you were talking about, Leanne, my partner out there, she has a food hall in Houston. So each thing on the menu, actually for a chef, for example, you can, instead of the whole menu as an investor being able to invest in the whole thing, you can actually choose a menu item, right? And the chef would retain the IP rights for that menu item, right? So the recipe. So you would be able to just share in the revenue that would come from that. And that's the beauty of the utility. So taking that NFT and as an investor to be able to say, hey, I'm gonna help you, it's a food truck, it's whatever, to help you get on your feet. I think that's a unique utility, being able to do just, everyone understands food. Of course, you can get more complex, but I think that those things in the future, as you commoditize things and value exchange, those utilities will be a huge part of everyday life.
That's super creative. I mean, just from spending time in Austin, I'd like to invest in the barbecue brisket recipe. I think that'd be a sound investment. So moving on here, Marty, how much time do we have, by the way?
About 10 minutes. I did have a question.
Okay, shoot.
Yeah, and this actually comes from an audience member who had asked it before. So the question was, given the announcements from the White House and also Europe, it seems like Europe and America are going in different directions with digital currencies. Any thoughts on that from a policy point of view?
Well, Biden has basically said that he wants to see, he's putting a working group together around the structure. But I think that outside of the US is still safer if you're going to issue a token, like through Singapore or other outside entities. Everything is still a security here. So if you're going to issue anything, as basically we're the lawyers, you know, I mean, they will always tell you, and after 1,000 hours of billing, it's still going to end up with security. So I think that all in all, until Biden and everyone comes out with a structure, everything, the stable coin, everything is still pegged to the dollar. And if you're going to do it, if you want anything as a US entity, you can only do Reg D to issue a warrant to then issue tokens outside the US. So if you can do it. So basically that's the only way you could structure it. If you want to be a US entity, raising money from US people has to be Reg D. CF and Reg A Plus is still non-accredited. And if you want to do those tokens out, the only way I would see it is a warrant Reg D, but then you have to have accredited and you can't really do non-accredited. So
okay.
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on this a little bit. I mean, Josh was right. It's kind of like this weird, like metaphorical swing guillotine over everyone's head, where it's like, when's the SEC going to do something? When is there going to be resources put behind enforcement? And the thing I always tell clients is that, you know, you're never going to be 100% in the black or the white. You're going to be in the gray, and it's all just a risk mitigation strategy. But cryptocurrencies are of course different than, let's just say, like ICOs, NFTs, etc. If you're a true cryptocurrency, SEC's opinion has been largely that it's fine. It's not necessarily security as long as there's a lot of factors, but basically the easier way to think about it is that cryptocurrency in its true sense, like a Bitcoin, like an Ethereum, etc., is been opined by the SEC to be in a safe zone, and anything else that's an ICO where it basically relies on the sophistication or the skills of other people, like managing a company, or like people that are creating value in those tokens, is most likely.
And I would say you would have to prove the decentralization though. So let's say Delta or Amex. You can't just be a loyalty program and say, oh, we have airline or we have a credit card too. You have to prove you're like a Delta or an Amex, and then as a byproduct, you have a loyalty program. So a lot of the companies just say, oh, you know, we're this, we don't even know how to run an airline, but we're a loyalty program. And you're not, so you can't say that. So I think that's what the SEC is really getting at. You have to basically scale outside of America, let's say as Ethereum, and then you come in and say, okay, you scaled, you've proven you're an Amex or a Delta, and then now it's okay to have a loyalty program. Because if not, you're gonna spend a lot of lawyer fees and you're gonna go around in circles.
Yeah, I mean, I personally have no objection with that. Josh, do you have any objection with that?
I think there's a lot of different strategies right now, and there's not a lot of guidance from not a lot of people. I will say the last executive order, the tone was much happier than in past executive orders, but that's about all anything new that I got out of it personally. They're still curious about it 13 years later. We'll see what they do.
In my opinion, the SEC and others need to kind of make a decision. They need to kind of, excuse me, but they need to kind of put it on the line and take a decision, because they're kind of, it's like past the hot potato, nobody really wants to deal with it. We're talking about it, but we're not really dealing with it. So guys, kind of stop messing around and let's have a decision. And you're right, if you look at stablecoin, which you'd think, okay, I'm getting rid of the volatility that I have in crypto. Then the SEC comes out and goes, well, actually, it's a money market fund because they're investing in mortgage-backed securities, asset-backed securities, and treasuries. So it should be regulated like any other money market fund. So guys, give us a rule book, give us a playbook. Digital currency, I think we kind of have in the deliverable currency space, whether it be dollars or euros or yen or pounds, they're already digital. I've got Venmo, I've got PayPal. So it's my money, I'm not carrying around cash. It is digital. It may not be tokenized, but it is digital, right? So then what are we talking about? But if we're in the non-deliverable world, and you look at the renminbi and the yuan, which is non-deliverable out of the currency, and they said, let's go digital, i.e. let's get it outside of our borders. I think that's super interesting. And that changes their economic dynamic. But give us a rule book. Give us the playbook which we can play with. Don't mess me around that today my investment's worth something and tomorrow you turn on me for some inexplicable reason and my investment goes to zero, because nobody wants that. And they really have to make a decision.
Yeah, so we got another question in the room,
Yeah,
Justin?
more of a comment again, sorry about it.
It's okay.
But I would say that, the problem with digital currency like Venmo, that's taxed. It's going through the US banking system. When you're going outside the US banking system, Uncle Sam doesn't like that. So the emerging markets like Africa have a real problem right now. Their central banks are getting circumvented. In Nigeria, the BBC direct the BBC. But I need to get a bank. Now, when I don't have control of my fiat and I don't be able to tax it, guess what? You lose control of your tax base, your economy crumbles. So that's a real concern for central banks and emerging markets. The US dollar with the reserve currency, we have less of that issue, but it's still an issue.
Well, I mean, it feels like eventually these loopholes are going to ultimately be closed. That's history repeats itself all the time.
Absolutely. I think Biden's making kind of a right move to say, let's put some frameworks around it. At least we know where we're going. But even if they are to check out in the US, look, there's going to be off-rails in some other country. If I'm a US citizen, but I'm doing perfectly legal in Belgium or Luxembourg, it's not legal to hold Bitcoin here, I'm still conducting business in a foreign country, unless they make it illegal to do overseas, which I can really not see them doing, but maybe. Yeah, exactly. Some countries somewhere will take fiat from my Bitcoin or from my person. I'm not worried.
Right, I think the issue is that there's really only 5 or 10 tradable currencies in the world right now. The rest is kind of garbage. Anybody who's into hyperinflation knows that you want to do things a crypto to crypto rather than in a hyperinflated currency or something that can be done. Argentina's gone through 3 currency devaluations in the last 15 or 20 years.
Absolutely. I mean, look, it's a huge hedge for third-party countries, emerging market countries. Look at use cases. You're living in Ukraine. By the way, you can have an option of $5 million gold or $5 million Bitcoin. While the Russians are coming, you have to transport that out of country. Which would you rather have in your back pocket? $5 million on your phone or $5 million worth of gold that you're not going to out of the country?
Sure. I mean, like Bitcoin had nefarious beginnings.
It still does. The FTR market, same as the regular art market. People are moving millions of dollars around illicitly. Everybody knows that. I mean, there's legit business time. But that is a cost of doing business. Like any hard asset that's very large, you think real estate deals are done and people aren't. I'm just gonna put it out there. There's previous money sources from various money going to real estate from China?
Sure. Listen, I live in New York. I know who owns places on the Upper East Side and Central Park West.
There's no difference.
Right. Well, we know what Kobe laundered half a trillion dollars of Mexican drug money. And Citigroup right now is caught up in another laundering scandal. So it's very common in the banking systems.
Right.
So I had actually a comment on what you're doing. So a buddy of mine is in gaming, and he has created an API to load anybody who has Shopify. They can load their store in Shopify into a game.
Oh, wow.
Right. So it's just a tube. It's just a pipe.
Yeah.
Boom. You're on in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a no code
Yeah,
solution. There's no coding. It's everything. Use the API and you're in a game.
Yeah.
Any game that subscribes to can create shops online in your game.
What game engine is he connecting to?
He's got 3 different gaming engines right now that I think he's come up with an agreement with. I think Sony is a big gaming.
Unity.
Right. So he's got 3 of them right now, right? So this is a guy who had done a gaming venture back in the 90s and sold it and made a lot of money. And now he's on it back. So is that what your API is going to do? Something along those lines?
Very similar. Yeah.
Already.
Yeah. So we're tapping into large customer bases that are already there. So the top 100 brands in the world that already have those customer bases, and the largest brands with the game engines that are already there. That middleware is the basically smart contracts, no code, to be able to connect that and communicate between those, starting with financial products, and then of course everything else. But exactly what you're saying, the Shopify is a prime example of.
I mean, it's already
a plug and play, yeah.
Right. So it's plug and play.
It's a plug and
You don't
play.
have to build a brand
Right,
new.
100%. And I think that's the future of connecting Web 2 to Web 3, is you have to have middleware to scale.
Yeah.
For JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, et cetera. As they shift, they're just needing more and more middleware to then make it safer, insurance security. The IP is already there. So everyone's going to follow the IP. The most trusted brands in the world is not going to change just because we're going to Web 2 to Web 3. It's still going to be there. The trust and the mechanisms, they're just now going to shift. And that's it. Either they're shifting or they're going to be left behind, but they still have the easiest way to shift. So maybe it's 80-20, maybe 80% of them shift, but it's not like they're going to have any less brand loyalty. It's just going to be a different perspective.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
I think people forget, and I'll let you be the commissioner here as far as when we call time. I think people forget that outside of Web3, the gaming industry has been the ones who've been able to make money off of digital goods and microtransactions to the tunes of billions of dollars a year.
Bigger than film and music put together.
Exactly.
I mean, huge.
Yeah, they figured it out, and they figured out gamification to the extent that gamification is now going into most products out there, right?
Yeah, we call it ownification. Web3 in the metaverse, ownification of owning your own data, owning your own future. The kid in Africa that is 5 years old, he can be providing it for his whole family by age 15, just in Roblox. And we're giving those templates to help basically everyone, not just teaching them how to fish, but giving them a marketplace to fish, I think is the future.
Absolutely.
Ownification feels like a really good insult as well when you're playing video games.
Well, just to build off of that, Naval Ravikant has a theory that I'm a big fan of.
He was asking to define Roblox.
Your roadblocks here, it's a term that you thrown around a lot, but
it's just a game. Yeah, so it's a game for more brands are calling their metaverse Roblox more than any other game.
Well, let me ask you a question. Sorry to interrupt. Have you familiar with the game SimCity? Like a video game back in the day?
Sure. Back in the day,
Okay.
It's a little more Oregon Trail age, but still.
Right.
Yeah, but basically, like think of SimCity as a frame of reference. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No. I think it just skews younger. So even 3-year-olds can get on their iPad and then go and talk to their friends. So it's literally like the new Facebook, in my opinion, where you can have basically you have all demographics going on and connecting, and that's why the brands have chosen to have their digital presence in Roblox, and that's why we're targeting as the first platform.
So they become affinity groups,
right?
Kind of like your Facebook used to be.
Exactly, community. So the kid, like the 3-year-old, can now connect with others. May not even be able to read, but they're connected. So I think that's the whole.
6-year-old does that. He's been playing since he was 4, and he uses Siri to type the text, but he can't read what someone else is writing back. So.
Oh my goodness. I love that.
So let me. I don't know if you have any more questions from online or from your. Let me ask this. So obviously we're at a family office network conference. Individually, collectively, if you guys were placing a bet on some form of crypto asset or crypto play or NFT play, what would that be? What does that look like? Is that a currency? Is that being a middleware, being, you know, the picks and axes as opposed to being the gold, or is it something that we haven't thought of yet? Josh, why don't you go ahead?
Well, I think you answered. For me, I'm agnostic. So whether the essential land works or fails, I don't really care. And so for me, in 20 years, I think the whole industry is going to move forward. And how it moves forward, I'm just betting on how do we be the best picks and axes to be able to have the backbone of industry, to be able to say, hey guys, I just want to support and however we can move forward. And I don't want to dictate, oh, we should go to this, you know, over this. And so for us, I think that's the best.
Fair enough. May, I see you, so why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I think the industry, it's going to be much on educating the rest of the population that still don't really understand digital currency and NFTs and such. So I think at some point we'll have to slow down and let everybody catch up before the innovations kind of moving at that rate. And I love the saying, because our tagline is the give a man a fish, who eats for a day, but teach a man to fish, he feeds for a lifetime. And that's similar to what we're doing in our platform. So I think projects will have currency, especially Web3, attached to it. So it's building that ecosystem, which is going to be really, really important, and the value behind it.
Samy.
So I'm a bit like Joshua. I don't know where it's going to go, but it's definitely going forwards. I think if there's things I'm going to bet on, is definitely blockchain technology. I think everything that touches the internet, if it has sane and logic behind it, is going to work. NFTs, it's a developing product, and I think that's going to continue to evolve. And I personally am more of a fan of NFTs over the currencies, because I just don't trust governments. But NFTs, because there's an asset behind it, be it art or something else that we're tokenizing, I put more value on that, because that's led by business. So blockchain and NFTs are kind of my bet.
Josh, Lida, why don't you bring us home?
Agree with what everyone said. I'm mostly agnostic on where I think it's definitely going, but I think if we're talking about where do I see opportunities in either investing or being a part of something growing, you're looking at the marketplaces. So let's use the NFT world, for example. OpenSea does like 98% of all NFT transactions. It's one centralized marketplace. So you want to look at who's building these platforms for people to then interact within these new emerging markets, whether it's video games, whether it's, you know, the roadblocks or the music. You know, me being an art guy, I think it's kind of fascinating being on the lookout for IP rights that are made available via NFTs or via NFT platforms, right? I mean, I think you see a trend with a lot of older musicians. Bruce Springsteen sold his catalog for $500 million, and a couple others. Companies are buying them, and they're using that as leverage to either just purely monetize it or loan out against it or license it or whatever it may be. So I think, you know, within the art space, there's a lot of opportunities in the IP play. And I just want to highlight, you know, I heard Bored Apes mentioned earlier, that's like the profile picture collection. That's a little bit different than like the pure art market. And that's different from like the music market. They are very insular in a lot of ways. There's overlap, but they're not necessarily the same thing. So that's something I'm going to be watching going forward, especially this year.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you.
Great job, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.